Fighting games are completely taken over. With the conclusion of EVO, you can definitely tell it wasn't just a massive event. It was the biggest fighting event ever in the history of EVO, which is the mecca of fighting games. Now, they do have multitudes of EVO events that go on throughout the year, but this one is the main, the king of the kings. You know, this is the throne, the massive worldwide one with all insane lineups. Now, fighting games have been having some insane tournaments, by the way, and it's kind of crazy because what's not talked about, in my opinion, at least in my opinion, right? Fighting games are not talked about enough. At least this year or this past year-ish. We had Mortal Kombat, then we had Street Fighter, then we had Tekken, all released. The three most mainstream games in the history of fighting games, at least brand-wise and longevity-wise for sure. Wait, was this Street Fighter first? It was Street Fighter first, right? So it was Street Fighter that was out in June, I believe. Then it was Mortal Kombat that was out in October. Then it was Tekken that was out in January. Yes, that's exactly how it was. So we had all three games really just release, and it was insane. I feel that that's still not talked about enough. I don't see that topic. That should have been, in my opinion, a massive topic for at least the whole year. The fact that we got those three titles in one calendar year within 11 months apart. So that's pretty crazy in my opinion. But yeah, with EVO going down, there's a lot of stuff, and it's so big now, the fighting events now, and especially this one in particular, because it was being shared by a lot of sources that, like, journalists that actually work with heavy duty IGN people and more mainstream sources that usually share like Call of Duty all day. They were sharing a lot of EVO moments. A lot of just people in totality that usually like cover other gaming, especially like the head honcho games, right? The FPS games and everything. And fighting game, which is known to be very niche, I think was finally shown to a more of a mainstream audience. Now, Tekken 8 has done amazing doing mainstream this past year. Incredible. To me, it's still the funnest game that out of those three, at least the mainstream Mount Rushmore of gaming. Mortal Kombat has kind of lacked that, and I think a lot of people are kind of looking left and right as to what game was going to fill that void for Mortal Kombat 1, because Mortal Kombat 1, although fun, at least it's solid. I'm not going to say it's like over the top fun. It's still pretty solid to me, in my opinion. I still have a good time on it. It never was really catered to the casuals wholeheartedly, and it was never really catered to competitive notions. At least like the highly competitive, those that are actually elite that compete at the top 8s in EVO. Not massively, right? They always have things in criticisms to say about this game. MK1 for sure. I think Street Fighter 6 is the most overall beloved. It's respectable. It's mainstream enough. Now, again, they have always been like the same inconsistent aspects. It can both be good and bad for Street Fighter 6, but when it comes to Mortal Kombat, it was just so inconsistent in the lowest numbers ever. So we were looking for stuff to really fill that void. And I think the EVO event in totality, it really cleared that void, because it just put us on, like, it put us massively on. A lot of streamers were like live literally at the event of EVO. A lot of diverse people, like just the diversity of who, countries, ethnicities, and everybody just kind of representing. So you could just tell, you know, the countries being repped, and just those who are doing phenomenal. It's incredible what's going down in this culture, at least in fighting games, which is known to be possibly one of the most niche, in my opinion. Somebody who covers virtual reality and fighting games, which is myself, I noticed those two are by far some of the most niche counterparts to overall mainstream gaming. Mainstream gaming is mainstream gaming, like things like Battle Royale and all that. And then even like single player story mode, linear story games, RPGs, especially like Elden Ring and, you know, Souls games, all that stuff. But I always feel like virtual reality and fighting games are like in this weird niche that it's a very small type community. It does have a lot of people, but it still feels like a small community. It's like a big city, small town feel is what I feel about virtual reality and fighting games. So this time around, it was just cool to see a lot of people like restreaming it. People that are not typically just, now they could have been paid to probably like showcase it and market it to even more people. That might have been the smartest option probably. Maybe EVO invested a lot more money and time to really try to get more of a mainstream audience. Again, fighting games are kind of confusing though also, because fighting games, although we want them to be as mainstream as possible, we don't necessarily want to water down the culture of it, right? Because there is a huge culture in it. Like FPS has a huge mainstream audience, which is like just content creators, quote unquote, or like maybe people that just play Warzone, because Warzone doesn't necessarily have a competitive route, at least not yet. And then you also have the actual multiplayer side of things, which is the highly competitive side in Call of Duty and all of that. So things like that they have two huge audiences on both spectrums. Fighting games is quite the opposite. The casual audience, a lot of people play. There's not a lot of massive casual content creators that really make fighting game content due to how much competition it has to be. It's like in fighting games, it's either you're good or it's a bust, or you're really just great at breaking down knowledge or just talking about the game in totality and all that. And we've ran massive statistics and analytics on all that stuff on our videos. We see what really works. We see what's not working. So fighting games, although meant to be real niche this time around, there's a lot of mainstream facets to it. Now, again, it's not watered down mainstream, which is good for us, but it has been good to see a little bit more of an expansion going down and the ideas that they were doing to get it out. And I'm always proud of that. And going back and circling back to Street Fighter 6, I feel that they've been the most consistent. Mortal Kombat has been really inconsistent their last 4 games, where I feel MK11 and MK1 back-to-back have not been the best of games, so that kind of that's too long to really like latch on and keep that mainstream audience. So that's like what, 5 years straight now of a game that's like like so depending on who you are. So that like has really dropped off on casuals, and it showed, like proven realistically in Evo, at least in the competitive side, or at least people that wanted to enter, even though we see a lot of familiar faces in the top 8 as per usual in Mortal Kombat, but at least the overall entries, I would say, it wasn't as big. It was in fact the lowest one, at least in a recent game. So that just shows. But then when I do polls with Mortal Kombat 1, I do a lot of research on Mortal Kombat 1 also. You can see that Mortal Kombat 1 is still loved by casuals, and Mortal Kombat, the brand, is always loved by casuals. So it's always a good sense of that. So there is some direction there that hopefully the whole Takeda situation, which is tomorrow, maybe he can do some things, and we'll be able to try to look into that tomorrow for sure. But we could just hope for that. Street Fighter 6 remains consistent, in my opinion, by far. They're great, both mainstream and competitive. Although their mainstream is just what it is, right? It's kind of like whoever mainstream audience they have latched onto, it's pretty much there. You stay hooked on it. 6 was a massive upgrade from Street Fighter 5 for sure. So that's always cool to see. And plus, it's a little bit easier now with the modern controls and all that. And speaking of modern controls, Street Fighter 6 creates these modern controls. So Street Fighter 6 walked so this next game coming up, Tekken 8, could run with special style. So those were 2 attempts back to back from these games that are the most popular right now. Most entries at Evo for sure, at least in a competitive notion. And in a casual sense, I feel a lot more. But I still think Mortal Kombat will always get that cake in like massive casuals. But at least somewhat casually, it's expanding a little bit, because I myself am a casual, a competitive casual, but it was my first year at Tekken, and I loved what Tekken was doing with this game. So I can only imagine like a lot more other people like me that kind of knew about these games, played these, not Tekken, but at least played Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter, and we started getting into Tekken. Tekken by far is like, by a landslide, is like my favorite for sure. But yeah, I think that has been cool with special style implemented. Again, like Tekken 8 is now running away with that whole special style, while Street Fighter 6 implemented the modern controls. Them two being the most at Evo was so cool. To me, Tekken is still a lot of fun to watch. I think because its dynamic range of the stage awareness is like 3D fighting, one of the last echelons of real 3D fighting. So I think that really embraces a lot. Now there is a lot of like updates and patches that need to happen to make it feel more 3D still, but they did do a great job with that to really up the defense in Tekken. So that has been fun also. But by far, one of the coolest things has been happening, and I saw so many mainstream people really sharing what was going down at Evo, and I think that's what makes me so excited for fighting games, because a lot of the times fighting games don't get a lot of love I feel that they should get, viewership especially, because they think it's always just competitive, which is rightfully so. It's a fighting game. Of course, you want to be competitive. But I think there's a lot more other things you can do, like to really ramp up an audience and get people really intrigued and convinced. Especially gaming now, it's kind of stale a little bit, at least currently. There are some great games that have on rotation, but overall, there's not this big old explosion going down like the way we first saw Battle Royale, the way we first saw a lot of titles of games. Xbox Showcase did show us a lot of stuff, but Evo was showing us like Capcom SNK, SVC Chaos, and the new SNK, and then just releases of Tekken characters, Heihachi, and then you just got like all this stuff going down. You still have the Marvel vs. Capcom collection. By far, one of the best stretches I think in fighting games that I had ever seen in my life. I have been seeing fighting games forever, since the 90s, and I'm pretty sure a lot of enthusiasts can really agree and attest to what I'm saying, that this stretch has possibly been one of the biggest expansions that we've seen of, like, whether it's putting eyes on these games, spreading awareness. Like, bigger creators also are doing a lot more now. I don't know if they're paid for it, but still, regardless, it still helps out in getting more audiences, more viewers. That means more wins for all of us that really love these games, that feel that are still too niche. Again, not too watered down mainstream. We don't want to dumb down anything, but at least mainstream enough so where there can be more opportunities for people that actually create content, that actually compete at least a competitive, respectable level. And yeah, so hopefully like a lot more opportunities will come around. And I think that this proved that there can be an audience, or at least even just a casual audience who just want to watch these games, viewership on Twitch. And I know there's going to be a lot going down, because I was seeing a lot of Call of Duty creators sharing stuff, journalists doing all this stuff. And I was like, yeah, hell yeah. Fighting games are definitely taking over, and I'm excited for it because it's something that we did need. It's something that there's something about fighting games that it can almost ruin your casual gaming experience. Not in like in a bad way, but especially a game like Tekken. I noticed when I started playing Tekken, the casual essence of me was like, damn. Like sometimes I like never wanted to play AI anymore, because the learning curve for Tekken is so high. And once you start seeing progress, it's like going to the gym when you play Tekken or any fighting game, right? It's the gym. You fight, you box, you do martial arts. And once you start seeing progression in plus frames and defense counters and parries and, knowing when to strike, footsies, just all these key turns you start learning, you start recognizing that, like, damn, like, when you go back to other games and you just got to face like AI, especially like linear stories or even RPGs at this essence, even games like, it can go all the way games to like Elden Ring. You still are like, it's satisfying, but it's not like as challenging as a game like Tekken, which is Tekken by far the hardest fighting game I've ever played in my life. And I think a lot of people's lives are going to really agree with that. So it is really cool to see that love for these fighting games, because once you start playing fighting games, it really is hard to start enjoying other games again. Some people are really raging at games like Call of Duty, and now I use Call of Duty as just like my comfort game now. Like literally, like Call of Duty is my comfort game now. and that just shows how far like fighting games are just taking over and doing things. Because when I learned Tekken, the amount of sweat, tears, rages, and strenuous action just to even get to like purple ranks, blue ranks, even up to Tekken King, it just was like, holy shit, man. That work is so like fulfilling once you get there. Now it is hard on the way, but it's much more fulfilling and rewarding than even games that I play like Call of Duty and all that. And I'm just like, yeah, FPS is cool. It'll always be great genre for me, but something that fighting games did that kept me addicted. And I think it's going to do it for a lot of people in recent years and moving forward in the near future, especially after this EVO event. So they are definitely taking over fighting games, I'm talking about as in they. And I feel that there's going to be much more, at least opportunity when it comes to finances. And because even till this day, some of the best players in the world are not able to financially help themselves, whether it's sponsors or just what they give for like those that even make top 8. It's like you have to win or bust. And a lot of these people travel on their own trying to like get sponsors to recognize them. And I think later on, like you'll start seeing more just content creators getting a lot more sponsorship help, especially those that are spreading education and awareness similar to what our channel does. And that's going to be good for the overall genre and those that want to spread awareness, man. I can't wait for it. I am super excited, though. But y'all got to be letting me know what's up. Evo was incredible. It was the best. It was a record-breaking Evo, record-breaking numbers, record-breaking everything, and just how busy that event was. I wasn't there physically. I hope to probably be there at some point, but I do know how much, how exhausting an event like that can be. But it is cool to watch, at least online for those that have busy lives. But y'all let me know what y'all think, man. Fighting games on the upcoming, man. Peace.